it's officially draft week here, Luke, and the Ravens are officially sort of kind of on the clock, and I'm sure some things will transpire between now and Thursday night. And I know you've been more peeled into this draft than maybe I have been this year, and it's a little weird where they're not going to pick early on Friday unless they deal out of Thursday. But it does not belabor the point. This is a really, really important week for them, and they better find some good football players here this week because they need them.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, we talk about it every year, right? This is a critical draft. We say this is the most important draft in recent memory. I mean, so a bit of that is just the recency of this moment, right? I mean, it's really one of those deals where every year we say these types of things. But when you look at where the Ravens stand right now, and I was really thinking about this a lot going into the weekend, I thought about the history of this franchise, and I thought about where this roster is at this standpoint, understanding they have the 22nd overall pick, and then they don't pick again until 85th. Now, they do have some good draft capital for late day 2 and early day 3 with 2 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks. But I thought about 2 positions specifically because wide receiver, we've talked about that how many different years, Nestor, where they need a wide receiver. They need a wide receiver.
Well, I do remember about 5 years that you spanked Ozzie and Eric about the secondary, so at least you're not doing
well,
I mean,
too,
dude, it is whack-a-mole, dude. We had a quarterback that every year I went to bed every night, every day, literally pretty much from the moment they drafted him, and some of the scouts started telling me, like, in August, like, we're really happy with this kid. This kid's a good kid. You know what I mean? They told me that in 2008. I never went to bed thinking, well, we can't win the Super Bowl. I don't look at Lamar Jackson yet and say, I believe, that I'm a believer. They're believers. I haven't found any other believers, quite frankly. You and I have been scouring the earth looking for believers. So the quarterback thing, I think we all slept better. We all slept better when Ray Lewis was around here for sure, right? We had the best player on the planet. I mean, that kind of helps. I mean, didn't help the Lakers this year.
Didn't help them that much.
Yeah, but you're right. I was going to say, didn't help the Lakers this year. But I would say this, for where they are right now and resting easy and where they are, you know, I'm with you, man. I mean, there's always something that's going to go wrong. There's always thinking, like, what would you say to Eric DeCosta or Harbaugh? What keeps you up at night right now? What are your 3 biggest concerns about your football team right now? This is the week they get to fix those 3 concerns because they've been sitting around thinking about it for at least 4 weeks, if not 4 months, right?
Right. Well, this is the week you hope to fix those concerns. But, you know, the point I was trying to make is wide receiver is something that isn't new as in terms of being a need. But I look at the 2 other big positions that we've talked about being edge rusher and inside linebacker. And I really got to thinking about this, Nestor. Over the history of this franchise, let's think about this. Let's start with edge rusher right now, a pass rusher, guy coming off of the edge that's going to wreak havoc on the left tackle, going to wreak havoc on the quarterback, a guy who's a threat to be a double-digit sack.
Is this the place where I play like James Holzhauser or like Ken Jennings and you play Jeopardy and I have to name all the edge rushers? Because I'm going through my mind now. I'm like, all right, Boulware, AD, maybe, Suggs.
Let's keep it simpler than that, though. Let's talk about first-round edge rusher on this roster.
Well, they haven't needed that player, right? Much, right?
But my point is, think about the history of this franchise. Peter Boulware was drafted in year 2 of the Ravens being in Baltimore. And then in 2003, they drafted Terrell Suggs. So think about this. The franchise for all but 1 year, and if you want to throw, who was it? Craig Powell, I think they drafted in 95. It was
Art Modell's
final first-round pick in Cleveland, and he was an outside backer, although he was a little more of a Sam kind of linebacker. But if we're going to throw him out of the equation, the Ravens have only had 1 season in their existence where they haven't had a legit first-round edge rusher on the roster because of what Peter Boulware did for 7 years, let's say, before the knee just made him a non-factor. And then Terrell Suggs was already on the roster by the time Boulware had faded away.
Well, McCrary was pretty good, too.
Sure. And let me be clear about this. I'm speaking more in a ceremonial sense that if they don't take a first-round edge rusher, if Burns or Farrell or any guy that we've all talked about that could be there maybe at 22nd overall, this will be the first time since 1996 that the Ravens haven't had a first-round pick of their own lining up at edge rusher. It's strange to think about that. And that's not to say that Matt Judon isn't a big part of the equation. Of course, he's had two really good seasons after a relatively quiet rookie season. So you're hoping he's ready to take the next step and to lead that position group. And you're hoping you get something more out of Tyus Bowser, Tim Williams, but you have that position group that's such a need. And then I'm going to shift very quickly to middle linebacker, inside linebacker, and you think about that group as far as what the Ravens have had over their existence. Ray Lewis in 1996 through 2012. You had a one-year gap there where you tried to draft Arthur Brown in the second round, and that obviously did not work out. He was one of their biggest busts of the last decade. Couldn't get on the field. But then a year later, they draft C.J. Mosley. So you have two positions on defense, edge rusher and inside linebacker, where the Ravens have been covered by a first-round pick for all but one season of their existence for those two groups, 96 with edge rusher with the Ravens and 2013 at inside linebacker. So it really just speaks to two positions that have been so important for them that they've hit on some wildly successful first-round picks, but at the very least, one of those spots isn't going to be filled by a first-round pick in 2019. So, the wide receiver thing, we've talked about that. We'll continue to talk about that. We'll see what they do there. That's a huge question. I'm not trying to diminish that, but we are really talking about some rare, almost uncharted territory for the Ravens to be so thin on paper at those two key defensive spots that they just haven't been in that position before. And even talking about when they have been in that spot, those rare isolated seasons. In the case of the inside linebacker, they had drafted an Arthur Brown. They had brought in a former second-round pick in Darryl Smith, who was good in Jacksonville for years. So they're really. You look at this thing on paper and you strip away everything we know about the Ravens to see them as light as they are at edge rusher and at inside linebacker and as many question marks as they have. And not to say they don't have some intriguing in-house guys. Certainly Patrick Owasso came on last year. Kenny Young showed some nice things as a rookie. But you're going to play a game, hypothetically, if you were lining up to kick off the 2019 season this week, boy, there are some questions about those two positions. And when you're picking 22nd overall and you don't have a second-round pick, you're not guaranteed to address those positions between now and the start of the season. So it just really strikes me as the Ravens being in some pretty rare territory at those two spots specifically, without even dwelling too much on wide receiver, as guys like me certainly have for years now.
He is Luke Jones. He's Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage. I'm playing all the games today with my cups and my hats and all that good stuff. Let's start at the top. The hat is Compass Point. I was down at Compass Point in Pasadena on Friday, visiting with some friends, seeing Robert Kennedy and seeing all the fun they're having down there. We're going to be having their golf pro on. We have a special Kiwi bloke from Compass Point, from Wellington, who's going to come on and spice things up here as the summer goes on, as well as Robert Kennedy doing golf. If you're in the mood to hit the golf ball, I know it's going to be in the 80s this week. Pasadena, 36 holes, Billy Casper course. They do great work down there, and if you need an event, they only have about 150 of them a year. I found that out the other day. Compass Point. Also, Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. You hear Cal talking about it here at WNST.net. You're going to hear Dr. Kevin Crutchfield a little later on in the week, and Dr. Craig Bennett helping us out, the orthopedics, as well as the concussion specialist, and anything that's sports medicine related. Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute, Foundry Row in Owings Mills. And then, of course, my mug is Cole Roofing and Gordy and Energy. They do our community and charity series around here. We have a whole host of great Baltimore positive stuff we're doing. Don Moeller's going to join us this week. We are doing Dutch Rupersberger next Thursday night on the 2nd of May at Pizza John's. We'll be swabbing for There Goes My Hero and for the Bone Marrow Registry, having our first, and I can't think of a better more Baltimore positive dude than Dutch Rupertsberger. So we'll be with Dutch. We'll go Dutch next Thursday night at Pizza John's in Essex. All brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. Luke, for me with the draft, and this is where I am when you have the 22nd pick. You feel like you had a good year because they did. You hosted a playoff game because you did. You lose a home playoff game, and no one ever feels good about that. I saw that with the Toronto Maple Leafs on Sunday. They didn't like that either. It's never any fun when you lose the home game. That can put you to the next level. And now, we sit all night Thursday, and I'm going to be at Silver Spring Mining Company on Thursday night, by the way, too. So I'll be telling everybody about that. And if the Caps keep going, we're going to keep doing that as well. I had a great time on Saturday night up there with Gary Rissling and all of our friends at Silver Spring Mining Company. One of our new sponsors. I got to get a hat from Gary. I'll put that on, too. But 22nd pick, it can be anything, anybody. Everyone seems to be thinking wide receiver because that's sort of the gaping hole in the minds of the fans. It's not what the team wants to do. We've talked about that for 3 months in this offense. A lot of people say, hey, center, guard, Yanda's getting a little older. We want to get bigger, stronger in the middle. That has to happen for the running game, for what this offense wants to do. Getting a really solid, athletic, smart center would change. Matt Burke would change everything around here. Now you're coming at me with, we need an edge rusher, we need inside linebacker, we lost C.J. Mosley. Yeah, and I start to think to myself, well, I mean, if they don't trade on Thursday night, what is our game story on Friday, right? You and me. If they pick at 22, they're not picking 6 guys, right? They're going to pick 1, if at all, or they're going to deal in and get another pick and whatever. And we're going to have ceremonial, I'm trying to Courtney Upshaws around here, right? Literally, right? If we start going into the second round, and then that really lowers the expectation of whatever we expect from the 43rd pick in the draft, right? And I guess the Hayden Hurst thing is we sort of have a first-round pick from last year that didn't materialize in that way that they still believe in, who's 28 years old or whatever, right? Or whatever it is, that they would say, well, this guy's going to be a bigger contributor this year than maybe we saw last year. So part of that in me is, what's going to get me excited Thursday? What are they going to do Thursday when I'm sitting at Silver Spring Mining Company? It's going to make me say, yeah, well, that's a great pick, or yeah, I'm get excited about it on Friday. I don't know. I don't know what they can do this weekend to excite the fan base. This needs to be a lunch pail weekend because there's not much they're going to do. It's going to win Twitter or beat the Browns this weekend, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. And really, when you're picking in the second half of the draft, short of taking a quarterback, like the Ravens did 32nd last year, trading back into the end of the first round, you're not really going to do anything that's going to wow people, that's going to win the draft, win the opening weekend of the draft. I mean, that's just, and let's face it, I mean, the Ravens, for the most part, the immediate reviews of what they do, they're always highly regarded because of their history, because of the success that they've had in the past. But you're right. When you look at this thing on paper, and to clarify, Hayden Hurst will be 26 in August. So, yeah, a little bit older as a draft pick.
I didn't mean to insult the guy. I mean,
I know.
Crying out loud, I'm 50,
Oh, I know. Hey, there's questions. I mean, he had an underwhelming rookie year. He got hurt and didn't do a whole lot.
And was also outperformed by the guy that was drafted below him, right? I mean, which, that would be the Dennis Pitta, Ed Dixon sort of thing, too, right?
Sure.
Like a little bit.
Oh, sure. No question about that.
And there's nothing wrong with Ed Dixon, by the way, who played in the Super Bowl, was still playing in the league. Ed Dixon's had a hell of a career.
Time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And he's a good dude. I mean, he was the kind of guy, that they wanted to have around there,
No doubt. But to your point, when you're picking 22nd, when you don't have a second-round pick, when you have 3 obvious needs and another highly want, talking the interior line. They could line up with their offensive line right now and play and be successful because it's the same group they had last year.
They did it already.
But
sure.
if you want to take this run-first kind of offense to another level, also understanding that Marshall Yanda is going to be a year older, a year closer to retirement, also understanding that you're trying to figure out left guard, which was problematic for them, but you have a guy like a Bradley Bozeman who will have another year of experience under his belt and played a little bit for them last year as a rookie and did a decent job. But regardless, you'd love to upgrade strengthen, improve, set up the interior offensive line for the future. So that's not an extreme need, but it's a high priority want. So you have three obvious needs: an edge rusher, wide receiver, and inside linebacker in some shape or fashion. You can rank those however you'd like as an individual. And then you have interior line, but you have one pick in the first 84 overall selections. So I think the overwhelming prevailing sentiment, and I know even Daniel Jeremiah, who, as you know, Nestor, has very close ties to the Ravens, so would have good reason to be plugged in as far as what they would like to do. He was quoted late last week as saying he'd be very surprised if they don't trade back. But, as we've said over and over, it's great to say you want to trade back. You need to have someone that's going to partner with you there. You need to have someone that's willing. So I think that's where the Ravens, even though they're not in the market for a quarterback, I keep going back to Drew Lock and Daniel Jones at the quarterback position and seeing where exactly do they fit into the hierarchy. We know Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins are going to go very, very early. I think everyone accepts that. And Kyler Murray, even though it seems like there's a little bit of wavering, still think he's going to be the first overall pick. But those two are going to be gone. But the question is going to be, is there a team picking after the Ravens or a team early in the second round, let's say, that really, really likes Drew Lock or Daniel Jones, and they're hanging around there when the Ravens are picking 22nd overall, that the Ravens can make a trade and recoup some draft capital? Do they move back in the first round? Do they hypothetically move out of the first round entirely and pick up an early second-round pick, two other picks in the third and fourth round, and maybe they get someone's first-round pick next year? The possibilities are endless in that regard. Do they move back to the end of the first round and package their first-round pick with, say, a fourth-round pick, and maybe they get an additional second-round pick, that second-round pick they used to move up for Lamar Jackson last year? So, but I keep coming back to, you have to have a team that really covets a player.
Well, nobody's better at doing this than them. I mean, they've been on the phone for 3 months trying to vibe everybody out.
Sure.
They know they have relationships everywhere where they can pick up the phone and make a deal. So from that, perspective, there's a wisdom and, the fact that they've been doing this for 25 years as a unit. I always feel pretty confident. I mean, I've had some off-the-record conversations that you're well aware of with various people, in the organization, and the one thing that really pisses them off is when they start getting compared to the Orioles. Top to bottom, I swear to God, and you know that. Anybody that looks at what the Orioles are and says, we don't want to be that, they're never unprepared. You know what I mean?
Sure.
They're never without a strategy and a well-thought-out strategy, even if you don't agree with their strategy. And I don't know that I would have moved my team toward a running quarterback, and and all that's going to entail. But that's what this team decided to take on last year in some sort of experimental way to sort of shock the world. And by the way, as we mentioned, they played a playoff game here a couple months ago, right? So it's not like it didn't work, and it's not like it's pretty to watch, but they're doing some of the dirty work that maybe other teams don't want to take on this athletic quarterback thing and say, how much can we shape our offense so that it doesn't look like a drop-back quarterback? And I think the whole league's toying with that in a lot of ways right now. And now defenses are going to have to toy with how to stop it because the college game is changing, which is changing the pro game.
Oh, no question. And this isn't something that, maybe specifically with the quarterback position, it's not overnight, but it's been a little more rapid over the last few years. But as we've said, Lamar Jackson's very unique. I don't know if you're going to see teams copying this per se. I mean, even Kyler Murray, there's so much talk about how accurate he is as a passer, despite the fact that he doesn't even have size that stacks up with Lamar Jackson, who is big enough, but not the biggest prototype quarterback in terms of size. So, but to go back to my point, I think with the Ravens trading back, what you really want is one of those teams late in the first round or very early in the second round who really like Drew Lock or really like Daniel Jones from Duke, and then they're sitting there at 22, and then they get the phone call. Because the only other position, and look, that's not to say that guys don't teams don't like certain prospects and won't trade up. But if you're really trying to cash in, the two positions that come to mind for me as far as teams are willing to be really bold and to give up something that might go beyond what the typical trade chart, the Jimmy Johnson chart that so many teams have used as a guideline, even if that's not always, it's not always treated as the gospel. But it's quarterback, and then you look at like what the Saints did last year, trading up to get Davenport, the edge rusher. Well, the issue is with the Ravens, they really could use an edge rusher. So if it's an edge rusher that's sitting there, it's going to be tough for them to bypass that unless someone just completely overwhelms them, or unless it's just an edge rusher that they, maybe they don't like the Farrell kid from Clemson or Brian Burns, even though I'm not even sure either of those guys will be there by the time the Ravens pick. But you're just looking for that perfect scenario where a team that has the right capital to entice you and the right prospect is there that team covets, that the Ravens can make a move back in the first round, maybe package another day 3 pick with their first-round pick, and before you know it, you have a late first-round pick and you have a late second-round pick, and all of a sudden your draft looks a little more whole, so to speak. So I still think that's the scenario the Ravens would prefer more than anything else. And I know Eric DeCosta talked about this a lot at the Liars Luncheon in the various times he spoke.
Which we're going to replay this week for old time's sake. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. But I think in a perfect world, yeah, they'd like to be able to move back because I think there is a lot of skepticism that, either the Devons at inside linebacker, Devin White or Devin Bush, I think that there's growing sentiment that both of those guys will be long gone. I think for a while the opinion has been White would be gone very early, but it seems like Devin Bush, there's more momentum for him to go off the board before the Ravens will pick. So inside linebacker at 22nd overall, probably not going to be able to address that. Edge rusher, as I mentioned, you look at some of the edge defenders, and obviously guys like Bosa, Josh Allen, they're going to be gone very, very quickly. Montez Sweat, there was some opinions early on in draft season that maybe the Ravens would get a shot at him. Sounds like he'll be gone long before 22. So you're looking at maybe a Clelin Ferrell, maybe a Brian Burns falling to them, but I think those edge rushers are that's one of the premium positions we always talk about in this league, especially in this day and age. So I think if you're the Ravens, if you're trying to take best player available, matching a need, it's tough to look at wide receiver and say that 22nd overall is going to be that best absolute value there. Although maybe they like Marquise Brown as a Deshaun Jackson speed burner kind of guy, despite his slight stature.
Part of this for me is who are they going to get onto the field in the most important way this year? You know what I mean?
Sure.
That would, and I don't know that a wide receiver is the answer to that. I don't know that there's any difference maker in this offense, in this draft at 22, that wouldn't be better served on trying to find a Hall of Fame center, or a Hall of really good pass rusher, as you pointed out. The things that are also a weakness here that maybe they could turn into a real strength. I'm not sure they could turn wide receiver into a strength with a first-round pick at 22. I'll believe that when I see it.
Sure, and part of that is just the track record of the organization. I mean, they just, even when they draft someone, they haven't developed him. So, and to be very clear about this, even if they're not going to take a wide receiver at 22nd, they better be taking a one on day 2 or multiple guys day 2 and day 3. And I'm not talking 6th and 7th round picks. I'm not talking about a Powerball ticket kind of guy that has little chance of developing ever. They need to spend some real draft capital. But that said, doesn't mean that the best spot for that is going to be 22nd overall. And that brings us back to the trade back possibility. But you have to have a team that's willing to do that, and you hope. And this goes back to the point you were making. The Ravens have done their homework in that regard. I mean, I think we can certainly debate players that they've taken, but in terms of draft day trades and acquiring capital and things of that nature, for the most part, you look at the trades that they've made, they've gotten good value in return. Now it's a question of, have you picked the right players? The players that you picked, have you developed them? Yeah, they've had their issues in that regard. Lots of teams do. I mean, I think what I've said overall for the last 5, 6, 7 years is not that the Ravens have suddenly become terrible at drafting. I just think there's been a regression to the rest of the pack, and I don't even know if it's the Ravens regressing as much as everyone else has so much more information as well. Now, it used to be a case that the Ravens 20 years ago may have had sincerely much better intel than other teams. There's so much information out there now that I think there are just so very few secrets from player to player, position group to position
that everything's a secret, literally, right?
So
like that the Raiders are throwing all their scouts out of their draft room a week ahead of time.
Yeah,
I mean, and apparently that's not all that unusual. I mean, apparently this week, apparently this week in Baltimore, there might only be 5 or 6 people, and that they don't want 22 people in their war room. They don't want every secretary, they certainly don't want guys like you and me in there. They just don't want anybody in there. And I get that, because there is this massive paranoia, and anything that's said in the next 4 days, it might as well be Sarah Huckabee slander saying it. You know what I mean? For me, I wouldn't believe anything I read or hear.
Oh, no question. I mean, at this point, and really it's the last couple of weeks, that's why I'm still not buying the overall sentiment about Kyler Murray maybe not going first overall, because that's been all the talk the last 2.5 months or so, that he'd be the top pick, and Kingsbury loves him so much in Arizona. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks, you're starting to hear hedging on that. I don't know. That sounds a little fishy to me, but we'll see. We'll find out Thursday night. We'll find out what happens Friday and Saturday. And in the case of the Ravens, it's going to be interesting, because very few times can I recall them having so many obvious needs going into the draft. You're always going to have one position that's an obvious.
Well, they've not had 5 guys walk out of the organization, who are, stalwart, decade-long, if not, in the league here. I mean, this has been unprecedented. I mean, literally, they've had their cupboard cleaned out. And given where Suggs and Weddle and Flacco were in their careers, and where Mosley is salary-wise, these were all decisions they made, or decisions that that were made by the football gods. None of this is a shock to them, right?
I mean, maybe they're a little shocked that they didn't keep C.J. Mosley, but I'll continue to.
I don't know about shock, dude. You and I spent 2 months. I mean, he's out in the parking lot drunk thinking he was going somewhere else, right? Like, I don't know, man. I mean, I thought somebody was going to wow him, and they did.
Well, I think they thought they were going to be able to get it done. Because, I mean, look, and it's been reported, their money wasn't, it's not as though they dug their heels in at $10 million a year and said that's it. I mean, they went as high as they were going to go, and they went very high, but the Jets went to an absurd level. But even that...
Well, then there is match it or replace him. So here we are, right?
Sure.
Here we are.
But even with that, even if there was some surprise that they didn't get it done with him, I would go back and say, well, you and I were talking 9-10 months ago during, even go back to training camp, and I know that there was absolutely a willingness, or at least an express willingness on his part, and maybe what his agent was telling the organization's different. And we know how players and agents and organizations, they all do the good cop, bad cop type routines. We know that. But the Ravens, C.J. Mosley would have been very much eager and willing and excited to lock up a long-term deal with the Ravens last year. And the Ravens didn't seem to really make much of a priority at that point. So even with that, even if they were really surprised with Mosley leaving, there was very much, you look at the game plan, you look at the playbook that the Ravens used and said, well, you know what? You could have made this problem a non-issue if you had done it 10 months sooner. But to get back to your point, it is, I don't know if I'd say unprecedented, because I think you look post-Super Bowl 47. Certainly you can go way back and post-2001, but as far as recent history goes, I do look at that 2013 offseason, And I'll throw 2015 in there. Keep in mind, Torrey Smith had walked out the door. They had traded Haloti Ngata. They had lost Pernell McPhee. They had lost Owen Daniels in free agency, and he was their top tight end at that point because they had no idea if Dennis Pitta was going to play again. And that's where I kind of caution everyone to not just obsess with need, because that 2015 draft, Rashad Perriman, first round. They addressed a wide receiver. They needed that.
I remember. You went through this one last week, and I remember it vividly because we spent 3 months talking about it, right?
Yeah.
They were replacing every guy.
They checked every box that they needed to, and when it was all said and done, of all the guys they replaced, Zadarius Smith eventually ended up being a really nice replacement for Pernell McPhee. The other ones were disappointments. So that's where you do have to, as a fan, keep in mind this is about the big picture, and even if the Ravens make a pick at 22, or even if they move back and hypothetically trade out of the first round entirely, understand that the idea isn't to win the night on April 26th or April 25th. The idea is to position yourself not just for 2019, but moving forward. And this is very clearly a Ravens team in my mind. I think it would have to be a pretty extraordinary sequence of events during the draft for the Ravens to come out of that and for me to say, boy, that's a team that might win the Super Bowl. I don't see anything that can happen that would make me feel that way. Now, they can do things that make me feel, hey, can certainly make the playoffs.
Let's be honest here, dude. I mean, as much as we're urinating upon the 2015 draft, and rightfully so, we better feel that way on Monday, right? On Monday, they better have brought a center in. They better have brought a wide receiver in. They better have brought a pass rusher in. They better have do something with inside linebacker and or have traded their fourth-round pick for somebody's, I always forget the guy's name, Smith from the Jacksonville Jaguars, right?
Right. Oh, and I'm glad you brought up the possibility of
what was his name, by the way? He was a nice man, 51. Come on, give me his name.
Daryl
Smith. I always forget his first name.
They didn't trade him.
But they better bring that kind of guy in.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But one thing you just mentioned, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention this, don't completely dismiss the possibility of the Ravens making a trade for a veteran player. And here's why. Going into draft week, and I'm looking right at the NFLPA site right now where they keep track of the salary cap space for every team in the NFL, the Ravens have almost $14 million in cap space. So what does that mean? They have the flexibility that if the right team with the right veteran at the right position comes calling and says, hey, you really need an inside linebacker, or you really need a wide receiver, or you really need an edge rusher after losing Terrell Suggs and Zadarius Smith, here's our guy, give us, and whatever it is, a third-round pick, whatever, but understanding that he's got a certain a salary that you have to fit under your cap. The Ravens do have more flexibility this time of year from a cap standpoint than they've had in quite some time. So don't completely dismiss that possibility as well. As much as we're focused on picking players and the draft, and certainly that's the Ravens' main focus right now, just don't keep that in the back of your mind. They do have the cap flexibility that they could make a move for a veteran player. And it might be a draft day trade. It might be something they do on Saturday. Who knows? They might want to wait to see how the first 3 rounds play out in terms of are they able to add an edge rusher? And who knows? Maybe they pull the trigger to acquire some team's edge rusher that maybe is looking to be a free agent next year and probably isn't in that team's plans. Who knows? Maybe the Ravens, use an early day 3 pick to pick up an edge rusher because they have, like I said, they have the cap flexibility to do something like that. So, I just wouldn't completely dismiss that notion as we're focused so much on who they're going to pick in the draft. If the right team comes along with the right veteran player, the Ravens do have the wherewithal to take on not an insane contract, but a pretty sizable, pretty big contract. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I don't think, put it this way. I think when it's all said and done, this goes back to the point you were making about Darryl Smith. Yes, they're going to pick football players, and yes, they're hoping to hit big on at least a couple guys, and you're hoping some other guys give you some nice depth and some upside and some developmental potential. But I still would be surprised if we don't see something, whether it's another free agent signing, whether it's a trade. I still think we're going to see maybe not a blockbuster move, but some notable move that's not completely tied into the draft between now and the start of the season. I still think we're going to see that. Doesn't mean it's going to make them a Super Bowl contender, but I still think the Ravens have to be looking at their roster just like anyone else is right now and saying, we've got more than just one need here. We've got more than just two needs here. So is there another channel that we can use to make our football team better? I would not at all dismiss that at some point either this week or in the coming weeks after the draft.
Big weekend for the Ravens out in Owings Mills. Luke Jones will be out there covering all things. And by the way, I mixed up Daryl Smith with Al Smith. I guess that's my senior moment now, going back to the Houston Oilers, who was also a pretty good linebacker as well. Now the director of player development at Vanderbilt. Who knew? And a guest on my show. He's in my phone. I'll call Al Smith, talk some football with him. These beautiful flowers, and they smell nice too. And my kitty likes them because they're purple, and she likes the baby's breath on them. These are from Sporticulture. My man Court out of Walnut Springs. We're going to be telling you all about Court because Court was an Oiler fan, which brings me to Al Smith. He has sent these beautiful flowers. You can order them on the internet at sporticulture.com. He also has sent me a lava lamp that I'm trying to find out how to get functional because I've never had a lava lamp. So go to sporticulture.com. They have all sorts of great stuff that you can ship, gifts, football stuff, college stuff, sports stuff. It is Sporticulture, sporticulture.com, and they have shipped me some beautiful flowers, and my wife wants to sit in here because it's Easter week, and the flowers have sprung, and it smells nice, and my cat wants the flowers, which means they're fresh. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. The kids call it podcasting, and you can listen to anything you want from anywhere you want as we get ready for the draft. Lots of draft coverage, lots of Baltimore positive coming up in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. The morning newspaper ships digitally each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness, planetfitness.com, where it's always $5 down, $10 a month. And, of course, brought to you by Laurel, where my wife and I went out, and I should have bet on a horse called Dirty in the 6th race. The horse won. Paid pretty good, too. Paid like $16. I would have cashed a ticket. Instead, I'm ripping tickets up. Laurel Park, they're having a big hootenanny down there for the Derby 2 weeks from now, so I'm going to put my hat on and get down there. And, of course, getting ready for Preakness at Hi-Ho, Pimlico. Nasty at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, and all night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if you're on the WNST text service, you will get the breaking news and the newest Ravens first. But you got to sign up at WNST.net. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis Colatzos will be the last line of defense here. I'll be on with him on Thursday afternoon. He'll be here from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the draft. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.